Welcome back to Outdoor Photo Workshop's tutorial on white balance. This is part 2, and as we promised, we were going to come back to Kelvin and the custom settings of white balance and how to create a custom white balance on your camera. So let's start with Kelvin. The Kelvin setting allows you to directly dial in the color temperature of the light you're shooting in. This can be a useful setting, but probably not one you want to use all the time, unless you feel the deep need to memorize the color temperature of every natural lighting situation and model of artificial lighting on the market. If so, then by all means knock yourself out. But using the Kelvin setting, you can also inject some creative color cast into your image. Someone here order a blue elk? Okay, so maybe the colors are a little unrealistic, but this gives you an idea for the potential of creative thought using the Kelvin setting. And it's a good idea to know the rough ranges of color temperatures of different lighting situations. Now on to custom, which may also be called manual, preset, or capital PRE on your particular camera. To set the stage, remember how I mentioned earlier that your camera is programmed with standards. This is true for white balance also. Each setting assumes a standard, that your typical color temperature of light and shade is 7500K, that daylight is 5500K, and so on. But in reality, the color temperature of the light is rarely exactly one of these standards. Is it light shade, moderate shade, filtered light coming through trees, or the heavy shade of a late afternoon? Using auto or the shade setting will probably get you close, but a custom white balance is in theory the most accurate for the given situation. Now I'm not saying that you should always use custom white balance in every possible situation, but knowing how to create and use a custom white balance is one more tool in your toolbox, and in some cases the only way you're going to get a truly accurate white balance. Personally, I use custom white balance a lot, but I've learned to recognize the times when it can't be used or when auto or the other presets will work just fine. So with all the fine print out of the way, here's how you change it. Well, at least on my camera. Seriously, each system has its own way of setting this, and it varies from model to model. So you know what I'm going to say, break out that manual. Now there are a lot of tools out there for creating a custom white balance. One of our partners is Expo Imaging, makers of the Expo Disc, which is a tool we use to create custom white balances. They have a ton of info on their site, including step-by-step guides for each model of camera on how to get a custom white balance. Here's their site. Go write it down, www.expoimaging.net. Got it? Good. Go there, go to their support page, and find your camera. This will walk you through the steps specific to your model. Now as for setting on a Canon 1D Mark III, the first thing you need to do is take a reference shot. Go ahead and shoot in whatever mode you're already on. Just make sure, at least on Canon models, that you have your white balance set to auto when you take the shot. On some systems it can be on any white balance preset. You can probably find that out in your manual also. Next, place the Expo Disc over the front of your lens, like so. Here I'm using a normal version of the Expo Disc. There's also a warming version that will add a slight warm tone to your images. Next, aim at the light source illuminating your subject, whether it's artificial light, the sun, whatever, and then take a shot. If it is overcast, point in the general direction of the sun at the time of day. If it is shady, just take a shot from wherever any light is coming from. The important thing is that the same type of light at the same angle is falling on the Expo Disc as is falling on your subject. Now pop the Expo Disc off and stow it away. You won't need it until the next time you set a custom white balance. Next, press the menu button on the back of your camera and use the top wheel to click over to the menu containing custom white balance. Use the wheel on the back to scroll down to that item and press the set key. On this screen you'll see several options. It starts off highlighting the number 1. This setting allows you to save multiple custom white balances for different light conditions. We'll skip past this down to register an image on the card using your scroll wheel and then the set button. This will pop up the reference image you just took, which should look like a grayish white blank square. If this is the right reference image, hit set again, otherwise use your scroll key to move to the right one. Hit set to tell it you're sure this is the one. Hit set again to tell it that you're really sure that this is the one. And then give your shutter button a half squeeze to exit the menu, or hit the menu button. Now your custom white balance is set to use the reference shot you just took. Just don't forget the last and most important step, which is change your white balance setting to use the custom white balance. Press the set button and scroll the wheel till the custom white balance icon pops up. Now you're all set. You can change it to a different white balance setting at any time, or register a new custom white balance setting by repeating the previous steps. Now welcome to the wonderful world of accurate colors. Now, a couple of things to keep in mind about using custom white balances. There are some situations where it can be a little cumbersome to take a custom white balance, such as rapidly changing lighting conditions. You have to take a new reference shot as the light changes, which in high action situations can lead to you missing the shot. Some cameras will allow you to record multiple white balances so you can flip back and forth, from say bright sun to cloudy if you have clouds moving overhead. Also, it can be difficult if you can't point it at the same light sources that your subject is in. Think back to our elk example. You're standing in the shade, the elk isn't. To get your reference shot, you need to be able to point your camera at the same light source and have the same temperature light fall on your lens. If the light is filtered, then it won't be the same temperature, and the reference shot will give you an inaccurate white balance. And finally, don't use it if you don't want the color cast removed. I never use the custom tool in the magic hours, those hours right after sunrise or before sunset when the light's really golden. I want to keep the rich warm tones of the light, and using the custom white balance would shift my colors back to the daylight standard, adding a little bluishness to my colors and removing the warmth. And bluishness is a word, or at least my spell checker thinks it is. So I'm guessing that the big questions remaining after having listened to all this are, should you mess with this? Can't the camera just take care of it? And can I just do this all in Photoshop? And the answers are yes, yes, and yes, with some big asterisks. As for whether to mess with it at all, think of it this way. Much like your exposures, it is good to know when to take control away from your camera. This is why cameras come with an exposure compensation setting, to give you the ability to override what the camera is telling you for your exposure. The same is true for white balance. Yes, your camera does have an auto white balance setting, and auto will work fine most of the time and produce acceptable results, but there is a reason for the additional presets and the ability to use a custom white balance. Remember, your camera has been programmed with some pretty sophisticated algorithms, but ultimately it is a computer running a program that makes assumptions based on the standards programmed into it. Most of the time these standards work pretty well, but sometimes they don't. And as a photographer, the important thing to understand is when these assumptions fall apart and when to take control away from the camera. In certain lighting conditions, the assumptions your camera makes just aren't not as accurate as they would be using a custom white balance or other preset. Now, as for changing things as part of your digital workflow, yes, you can certainly change your white balance after the fact, especially if you shoot in the RAW format. For example, in Adobe Lightroom 2, just click on the Develop tab, and you can select any white balance available, or just change it to a specific color temperature. However, getting it right in the field can save you a ton of time in post-processing. You can just batch convert everything using the as shot setting for white balance versus fiddling with each image. This is also a reason why setting a custom white balance is a good idea too. In theory, it will be more accurate than all the presets as it is specifically based on the given lighting conditions at the moment your image is captured. It gives you one more option for your white balance and eliminates some of the guesswork of picking a white balance using a color picker or other method in Photoshop. You can certainly use a color picker to pick a neutral area in your image in Photoshop, but if you have a noisy image, you may pick the wrong pixel and end up with a very weird looking color cast on your image. So that's everything I can think of for white balance. The important thing is to get out there, mess with the settings, and see what you can come up with. Understanding the white balance will give you a better appreciation for the quality of light, and you should see a real difference in the colors of your images. I hope you enjoyed this video and feel a lot more comfortable with the concepts of white balance. As always, please send us your feedback. We want to hear what you think, whether you love it or hate it, and also to make sure that we cover the things you most want to learn about nature photography and the digital workflow. Until next time, this is Jason Hahn with Outdoor Photo Workshops.